Hello and welcome back to another Thoughts Per episode, Bleach Thousand Year Blood War Edition. What an episode! Okay, so look, I know previous episode with Yamamoto was like the big episode of a series with like the huge amount of like animation work put into it, and it was a really good battle and everything, but I think this might be my favourite episode so far. And also this episode was not devoid of its own star animation. Let's go through it chronologically so I don't just gush in every direction. So interestingly, I don't know when it was, a week or two ago, and I only found out about this a couple days ago, Kubo revealed designs for the original Gotei 13, the original Court Guard squad captains, and everyone was like, huh, why is he doing that? And now we know why he did that, because he designed them for this. This wasn't in the manga. The intro showing the original showdown between the Court Guard squad captains and the Quincy's, or if it was shown, the captains would have only have been shown like from the back or as like silhouettes, I can tell you that much. And so we got this cold open of the original captains, and they're still kind of a bit silhouette-y, we don't really see them, but they also show up in the outro if you want to see more of them, more of their designs. They changed the outro, it's the same song but it's new visuals to show the original captains, and it's super cool that they did that. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed something interesting which may crop up later. But interestingly, and I'm pretty damn sure this is a detail which never got revealed before, it's shown that Sasaki Kibe kind of played dead and then, or maybe like was pretty much dead but revived himself and stabbed Iwak and then very quickly retreated so that Yamamoto could finish him off. So we're really being shown the partnership between the two characters there, them working together, and just how different that age was. And of course later on Iwak is telling Yamamoto, the dying Yamamoto, that like, yeah, you lost because you're soft. You care about people now, and that makes you soft, and that's why you're lost, and all that stuff. He basically called Yamamoto woke. And I think it has been mentioned before, this idea of Yamamoto quote-unquote going soft, because I'm trying to remember, but I think at some point someone mentions that Ichigo even changed Yamamoto, like in terms of how Ichigo's appearance changed Soul Society's values and beliefs. I'm pretty sure that gets mentioned at some point. At the end of the last episode, they did this thing where they basically showed the manga panel, or redrew the manga panel of Yamamoto being cut in half, and I was a little bit worried that like, well, you know, come on, this is like an adaptation to anime. I was hoping to see it in like full visual style, but we did actually see that this episode. We saw Iwak talking down to Yamamoto's head, stepping on his head and everything, as his, well, I was going to say decapitated, but it's more than decapitated, as his bisected body is still stood up next to them, and it's just really fucking grisly and cool. Before that, though, we get this flashback of Shunsui sneaking into Yamamoto's room, and you can see this painting, which is clearly of Yamamoto in his Bankai form. And interestingly, Yamamoto refers to that painting as a painting of a monster which appeared long ago. And I think this was in the manga, I don't quite remember. But it's interesting with all the added context of seeing some of the backstory of the original Gotei 13 to see how Yamamoto basically views that version of himself as this careless, unfeeling monster, and mentions that if it ever comes back, he will never return, which obviously was meant to be kind of like ambiguous as to what he meant when he was talking to Shunsui, but we, the audience, knows that he basically means if he ever has to resort to that level of power again, then he's not going to be alive by the end of it, he's sure, which for one thing kind of makes you think, okay buddy, well that's not very, you don't have much faith in your ability to win there, but maybe he just means that he wouldn't allow himself to live after the shame of being that person again. I don't know, but it also kind of like for fans questioning why didn't he show that level of strength against Aizen, even though to be fair Aizen did lock his abilities away and stuff, like why did he not like try and break free of that or whatever. This is another layer of why he didn't, because he really doesn't want to be Zanka no Tachi version of himself again. The choice of soundtrack here was amazing, as well as Iwak was talking down to Yamamoto. I forget what it's called, but one of the sad kind of plucky violin-y, or is it harp? I'm not good at musical instruments. But one of those tracks was playing a remix of one of the original tracks. And then later on towards the end of the episode, when we saw Ichigo's despair, they fucking redid the song Nothing Can Be Explained, which is one of the earliest, most emo songs in Bleach, which I believe was used a lot during the original like backstory of Ichigo, talking about how his mum died and everything. So it's super fitting that they brought that back. Like, it really takes you back to that point in the anime. But look at me jumping ahead again. So yeah, last part of Yamamoto, I like that we get the 2 stages of like, holy shit, he lost reactions from the captains, and then holy shit, he's fucking dead reactions from the captains, because obviously Yamamoto's arm grabs Iwak's leg, which shows that there's still some residual soul left in that body, but then Iwak fucking exterminates the entire body, and like the reactions we get from the captains really drives home just like the horror of that action. And then of course we get Ichigo. That's like all it took really for Ichigo to finally break out of the jail. And this is, I think, the part of the episode I loved the most, Ichigo's entrance. Obviously, Bleach is a story which very much relies on how cool the protagonist is and how strong the protagonist is. Obviously, you've still got all of these other really cool characters with fleshed out abilities in their own fights, but if you look up top 10 best Bleach fights, I mean, I'm sure the Yamamoto one will be up there now, but before that, it's almost all Ichigo all the way down. Ichigo is undoubtedly the character which gets the most amount of love and attention in terms of character growth, development, entrances, power-ups, you know, fight scenes, and that hasn't changed. One of the things that's so exciting about an anime adaptation of a manga is how it can accentuate and emphasize the kind of themes of, like, you know, through use of animation and color palette and soundtrack, it can really enhance like despair and like anger and just fucking sick ass entrances like this one. My words fail me. It is in stark contrast to Ichigo's entrance to the final Aizen fight. I mean, in both times he was very silent, stoic, didn't really say a word, but his strength could be felt by his peers. But in one scene, it's, you know, it's like, it's, oh shit, he's here to mess some shit up. But in this scene, they use that wonderful new version of On the Precipice of Defeat, and then for the most part, it's silent as he's kind of examining the situation and talking to people, except for these wonderful sound effects where you can see him, like, for instance, in one part, he's like in one area, and then as he decides to go to somewhere else, as maybe he notices another bit of spiritual pressure, there's this wonderful, like, noise as, like, he, like, just disappears, and it really accentuates, I need to stop saying accentuates where it doesn't make sense. It really emphasizes, like, his power and also, like, the contained power within him, if you know what I mean. And then, of course, that wonderful conversation between him and Byakuya, where he doesn't say a word, but Byakuya lays bare his soul, basically. I mean, he does say a word. He says that Ruki and Renji are okay, basically. He just confirms that they're alive. But like, Byakuya talks about how ashamed he is of how he led his men to death and how he can't protect Soul Society, how he's really, like, ashamed that he has to ask a human whose business it shouldn't be to save Soul Society. But just, like, oh, the voice acting for that scene was perfect, and I'm just so happy. I'm just so happy. And then, of course, Ichigo's entrance when he goes to fight Iwak. And you have, I mean, we've seen it before, Ichigo being, like, very, very stern, stoic, and cold, and then exploding with anger, but it's just done so well here, isn't it? And the absurd effects animation as well, and the fight between them was so quick. Ichigo's speed is something, like, that isn't shown off very well in the anime in previous fights. Like, obviously Ichigo versus Byakuya, that was the whole point, because it was the first time we ever saw his Bankai, but that's kind of like his Bankai's main power, and we hardly ever see it. There are some fights in the anime where he's in his Bankai form and he seems downright slow, and I think that's because the story at that point was really getting to the point where it's like, oh, he needs his hollow mask to really fight against the Arrancar because he needs to be stronger. And obviously his hollow mask isn't in play here, so we're back to kind of like Ichigo's Bankai is Ichigo's, like, highest power level, at least in terms of this fight. I won't spoil anything in the future or what may or may not be occurring in the background, but you really get a sense of just how quick and how powerful Ichigo is, and yet he still gets his ass pretty much handed to him by Owak here. So of course that also shows us just how powerful Owak is. And I wasn't actually expecting too much from this fight, because it's not really like a full-on fight, it's more of like a brief skirmish in which Ichigo gets his ass handed to him. But it was actually really, really well animated. I'm so pleased. At one point, I just started laughing and clapping my hands at the screen. And I think a really good sign of when I'm really enjoying something is when I physically react to it. And yeah, I was reacting physically a lot during this episode. And of course, we get the revelation of Ichigo using Blutven, and the revelation of like, oh, you don't know anything about your mother, do you? And like, of course, as I already mentioned, that theme coming back into play. By the way, that scene where Owak just has his sword on Ichigo's throat, Ichigo looks like a cornered animal. It's so cool. It really feels like Owak is trying to like, you know, put a lion down, like, stop fighting, come on, look, I'm more powerful than you. And you've got the hatred burning in Ichigo's eyes, and then like the fighting back when it's like, okay, we've sorted that out, and it's like, no, you fucking haven't, and he fights back. And something which you wouldn't have got in the manga, because we didn't get the whole original Gote 13 little intro bit in the manga, is this kind of like parallel scene of the fact that Hushwolf severs Ichigo's sword, or breaks Ichigo's sword, I guess I should say. It reminds us of how Sasaki Kibe is the one to strike a mortal blow to Owak. And it doesn't really mean anything, it doesn't exactly foreshadow anything, but it is cool. It reminds us not to ignore the right-hand mans of Bleach. But yeah, the villain's leaving while the rain soaks like a blood-drenched field of enemies, and the main character like having a big revelation thrown on him and being thrust into despair is so Bleach. It follows the pattern of a lot of Bleach arcs. I guess if there's one criticism to be had of this episode, it's that it definitely feels like a pattern we've seen before. But the way this episode was done was so well done. I could cry. It's so good. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Thoughts Per Episode Bleach 1000 Year Blood War Edition. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Thank you for all the views on this series as well, by the way. It seems like people really enjoy these, and I really enjoy making them, so it's good to know. Subscribe if you would like more. I will see you next week. I think I'm going to go and watch the episode again.